So now we are done. At least we have some understanding कि टास्क क्या होता है, कौन कौन सा टास्क मशीन लर्निंग के साथ, जैसे मैंने बोला क्लासिफिकेशन हो गया, रिग्रेशन हो गया, देन वी हैव ट्रांसक्रिप्शन, देन वी हैव दिस जनरेशन, सिंथेसिस, ये बहुत सारी चीज़ें होगी. तो now we will see कि एक्सपीरियंस क्या होता है, what do you mean with that word experience E. In the setting you learn by different ways. कि हम जो सीखने के तरीके वो बहुत सारे होते हैं. The first thing is that is supervised learning. Okay, I'll write it here. Supervised learning. अगर मैं इंग्लिश सेंस में बताऊं व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ सुपरवाइज्ड, सिंपली पुट कि समथिंग इज वाचिंग यू. So by supervised learning, I mean I was talking about what is the meaning of supervised. Supervised means if somebody is looking after. For example, where in the exams we have supervisors. Supervisor means somebody is guiding. There is a guiding principle or something. Similar in the learning, as I talk about, I just had a conversation with you about data. What is data? Data has two things. Now, if you see cats and dogs, I have data as images. Okay. With the image, I have labels as well. Okay. For example, I had an image like this. Some image was there, and it was labeled it's a dog. There was another image, and for example, it was like this, and it was labeled it is a cat. So there are two things to each the data point. It is having these set of features, then a label. Okay. So if I talk about these handwritten digits, if I wrote some things like this, one, it is an image, for example. It is labeled as one. There is a label as well written on it. So when you feed, when a learning algorithm works, learning happens in such a way that it takes data plus label as an input. So we call it a supervised learning. So for example, cat or dog example में, if we give image plus labels का मतलब ये image cat है, ये image dog है, with the image we are giving labels as well. तो हम उसको कहते हैं कि ये supervised learning में रह रहा है. So okay, so let me talk about this mathematical setup. So setup क्या है, यहाँ पे हमारा डेटा कैसा दिख रहा है अभी. So we have some data set D. In that we have pair of things. Xi's, that is a vector, for example, in which we have some features. Let's say we'll start with x1 is a data point, and we have a label corresponding y1. Then a second data point we have x2, and then it has a label y2. Similarly, we have, let's say, m data points. xm, we have m number of data points, and we have a label corresponding date. So this is what I mean by supervised learning. In supervised learning, we have data as well as its labels. So what is the thing? This x's, xi's, they come from some set x for a set of images in case of dogs. In case of spam filters, they come from a bunch of emails. And these y's, they come from, for example, a subset of y. That means some labels. In spam, no spam. So in the upfront, we have a set of data points with the labels. And if the learning is done in that process, that's called supervised learning. Supervised में ऐसा होता है कि हमारे पास डेटा भी है, उसके लेबल भी corresponding है. तो then we feed these things to the machine कि ये image dog की है, ये image cat की है, now learn. कि हम लोग इसके बाद उसको कोई और डेटा पॉइंट देंगे. We'll don't give the labels. In the testing phase हम लोग सिर्फ एक्सेस देंगे उसके बाद. We'll say बताओ ये वाली इमेज अब कौन सी है. For example, if we learn, अगर हम जब बच्चे को पढ़ाते हैं, we'll say this symbol is A, this symbol is B. Then we'll say okay, identify these symbols in this. This basically is a supervised learning. In the first case, you showed them the data and the labels as well. But when you were testing, तो तुमने एक set of symbols दे, बोला चलो इनको identify करो अब. Okay? So is supervised learning clear? What is it? We have data points with the labels, and we feed that to the machine. And whenever a prediction is made, it is made based on the labels and the data that we saw. That's called the supervised learning. So I was talking to supervised learning. We have data points, for example, image as well as labels in there. Data plus label is fed into the machine learning, and then we get the output, corresponding output out of it. And we get a machine learning model in which we'll feed new data, and then we'll get the prediction. So in a setting in which we have data plus labels, that's called supervised. So unsupervised, it means we have just data, we don't have labels. We don't have labels. Okay? There are no labels, there is data only. So there are algorithms which work on the supervised setting. For example, support vector machine is an algorithm. There are k nearest neighbor is an algorithm. So these algorithms, they work on supervised setting where they have data as well as the label. So for example, unsupervised, there are algorithms like clustering. There are no labels. For example, we are given a bunch of patients without telling that which of them have cancer. We try to find clusters. Okay, we find clusters like this. There will be a cluster like this, and the other cluster will be like this. So if we find two clusters without even knowing the labels initially, so then we can say this cluster of patients have cancer and these don't have cancer. This is called unsupervised learning. In the unsupervised learning, what do we have? We have just data points. So we have like this x1 comma x2, these are the points till xm if there are m data points. There are no labels with it, and we've tried to find the clusters, or we try to do some learning without the label. This is without labels. That's why it's called unsupervised learning. Okay. Then we have what's called as reinforcement learning. In the reinforcement learning, it basically takes a feedback. So for example, how do humans learn? They use a mix of all of these things. Reinforcement learning means there is, for example, an agent. Agent means a person or some machine which wants to do something. So if it performs an action, then it gets some reward. And if, for example, if it has to identify something and it felt, oh, I'm doing it correctly, so it will again do that. So it will take some sort of feedback. If it does some task, it will be reinforced. The decision will be reinforced. I don't want to go technical term. There are something called exploitation, exploration. I just want you to learn reinforcement learning means it is actually taking inputs from the previous outputs. For it something happened, it will take it as in feedback. It's not just we'll just stop it like we did something and based on the data only. So here data is also there, but there are also functions. For example, by doing this thing, I got this much of reward. Or for example, by doing this thing, the reward was negative. So I don't do this. I should not do this move often. So actually feedback is there. So here you can just write there is a feedback. And we have something called as exploration of states, exploitation. This in itself is a huge field. That's called reinforcement learning. Like there are something like some other even core subjects which have been taught in this reinforcement learning. Then there are something called as reinforcement learning by human feedback. There are some things like that. By reinforcement, I just wanted to convey that in reinforcement learning, हमारे पास एक agent होता है, it performs certain actions, and it gets a feedback from those actions. और उसके बाद वो अपनी actions को correct करने लग जाता है. That's what I mean by this feedback answer. Unsupervised में we have data plus labels. In unsupervised we have just data. In reinforcement learning we have an agent, set of actions, and then it performs set of actions. और उस actions की वजह से क्या होता है? It tries to make its decisions better. So now we know what is an experience. ना हमारे पास टास्क भी आ गया कि टास्क क्या होती है, कितने कितने किस्म के टास्क होते हैं. Now we saw कि कैसे कैसे चीज़ों को सीखते हैं. There are ways of learning. कि सुपरवाइज्ड सेटिंग में सीख सकते हैं, अनसुपरवाइज्ड सेटिंग में सीख सकते हैं, reinforcement learning के हिसाब से सीख सकते हैं. Now we have to measure it. कि अच्छा ये तो learning तो मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि ये अब perform कैसा कर रहा है वो मुझे देखना है. There are a lot of performance metrics. The only thing I'll talk is accuracy or error rate. So while we'll go with your projects and other things, we'll slowly learn about other measures. Accuracy means ऐसा होता है कि अगर मेरे पास 10 पेशेंट्स थे, 10 में से अगर 10 were diseased, अगर 10 में से फॉर एग्जांपल let's say 7 डिजीज थे और 3 जो थे that were नॉन डिजीज, अगर मैंने कोई एल्गोरिथम लिखा ना, आई ट्रेंड अ मशीन लर्निंग मॉडल, और मशीन लर्निंग मॉडल को अब मैं ये एग्जांपल्स फीड कर रहा हूँ कि मुझे बताओ इनमें से कौन सा डिजीज है. फॉर एग्जांपल लेट्स सपोज कि ये इन 7 में से ये 6 को डिजीज बोल रहा है. दैट मीन्स 6 प्रेडिक्शंस वर राइट. ओके, 1 वाज नॉट राइट among those diseases, और 3 में ये 3 को non disease बोल रहा है. That means it made one mistake. That means the accuracy is 9/10. That's 90% it was accurate. क्योंकि एक ही गलती करी इसने. That is the number of things it got right was 9 out of 10. So we'll say it has a 90% of accuracy. Okay, this is how we measure accuracy. We'll also look at different methods of performance. I'll say one performance measure is accuracy. So there are, for example, other scores like F1 score is there. There are, for example, precision is there, recall is there. Then we have something called as area under curve, RUCs. There is something called as root mean square, RMSE error. There is something called as MSE error only. There is absolute mean square error. So there are a lot of metrics that we will see how to measure these performance. क्योंकि अगर हम अब कोई टास्क कर रहे हैं, we need to see कि सही में जो ये टास्क करने वाला है with experience क्या है, better हो भी रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा है. Okay, so that we have to perform. So I just gave accuracy is one of the measure जहाँ पे हम देखते हैं कितनी prediction सही हुई और कितने prediction, because no algorithm on the world will be 100% accurate. कोई ना कोई गलती, अगर if it is 100% accurate, it's memorization. It's trying to memorize the things. Also wanted to also differentiate between memorization and generalization. That will probably take up in other session. So memorization is not a good thing. That's actually in technical terms that's called overfitting. That we will see. So in this session, I'll just summarize it before closing. We started with the history, a brief history, how it started, all the things, and then what happened. And then we started with the definition, what is meaning of the task. And then we started, okay, what is mean by this experience E. And then we started with what is the meaning of this performance, how do we measure performance, okay, P. And then in the task we again read a lot of things. So here in the detail we discussed कि task क्या होता है, then what is the experience, the performance कैसे हम लोग measure करते हैं. It was actually to justify this definition basically. कि हम जो definition पढ़ रहे थे कि with the experience, where is that? हाँ, right here. A program is set to learn from experience C. एक program को हम लोग कह सकते हैं कि it is learning from some experience C. With respect to some classes, class of task, अगर इसको कोई task करने को दिया जाए तो हम उसकी performance measure करते हैं by using P. तो हम लोग कहते हैं कि ये तब learn कर रहा है जब इसका performance जो है वो increase करेगा, when it will have a higher performance which is measured by P on that task T while it is having some experience, it has some experience E. I think we just covered the basics of what is the meaning of like these terms, because these terms will be the terms जो हम frequently use करेंगे in the upcoming session. I think from upcoming session I'll just delve into the bit of this theory again sometime अगर मुझे चाहिए, and mostly we'll start with the basic Python. हम लोग Python के बारे में I think we'll require one session so that you will be able to code it. और इसके बारे में जितना मैंने ये सारी डिटेल्स बताई, I would probably give you some links as well. अगर तुम follow करना चाहते हो, I'll give some good links to some blogs, to some books also, and to some good videos. जहाँ पे ये तुम्हें लगे कि okay, if we need to revise, if we need to get some good concepts as well, तो मैं कुछ links दे दूँगा. I'll post them in your emails or in the group itself. And the second session, the session 2, we'll have on Python, in which we'll learn fundamentals of Python so that we can code in the next session as well. तो क्योंकि उसके बाद हम प्रोजेक्ट करने हैं, so second session be ready for the Python.